Well, here we are once again with Fork in the Road, where we talk to the leaders in sports, business, and entertainment. And it's not often that we get someone that's across all three pillars. Usually it's one, but this bloke has got them all covered. From media mogul, being in at Channel 9, Triple M, Fox Footy, president of his beloved Collingwood Football Club, long-running footy show, but more importantly, he played some games. Did you play some games for North Melbourne under-19s, Eddie McGuire?
Go Corey, how are you, mate? Like you, I was a mad Collingwood supporter, but thrust into North Melbourne via zones. But I trained down there in the under-19s, I think for about 3 or 4 years. I went down when I was about 15, I think, and didn't play because my school wouldn't let me play because I was on a scholarship. And then the year that I was going to have a real go, I got a job at Channel 10. So that was it. So I played a couple of practice matches, and that was it. Dennis Pagan took over as the coach. In fact, when I was there, John Ibram was the coach, and then Dennis was the assistant coach. Imagine Dennis Pagan being the assistant coach at the under-19s. And then he became the under-19s coach, and that was the start of just an amazing career for Dennis. And, I look back on that, some of his sayings, even then in the under-19s, and the way he coached. And he was always going to be a superstar coach. He had a huge impact on me, even for a pre-season. He was tough. He was unrelenting. And, he was. He did. He left an indelible mark on me as a 17, 18-year-old.
He certainly did. Now, you mentioned Ed. You mentioned a couple of things about Broadmeadows and then even the North Melbourne under-19s. But especially growing up in Broadie, I was a Gladstone Park, West Meadows boy.
Yeah, mate, we call that Mortgage Hill. That was, we used to dream about Gladstone Park, West Meadows. I mean, that's where you went for holidays, mate. You blokes up there on the hill looking down at us poor people from Broadie, gee.
Yeah, I know. But one thing it did, Ed, it did teach you to be very resourceful. Now, the one I did have a giggle at, and this is probably not a very well-known story, the Macedon Rangers Telegraph. Was it I reckon it was some of the Broadie in you that maybe you wrote a letter to Channel 10 and you warned them that the Macedon Rangers Telegraph would actually swoop you up. So that was some of that Broadie resourcefulness, a bit of Dal Considine, a bit of Kevin Ramsey coming out.
Right, it was a funny one, actually. It would be better than that, because what had happened, I'd been working at Channel 10 while I was at school from September, in fact, the first week of the finals of 1982. And it worked all the way through, all the summer, so that, finishing up HSC, didn't have any holidays, worked all the time. And what had happened is I remember it was actually my birthday, believe it or not, was the last day of school before SWATback. And the next day on the Saturday, they had the age exam. In those days, you had to go and sit an exam at the Melbourne University. And I got through the exam and actually got a job at the age. I was the last person to come straight out of high school to get a job at the age. But because the economics at that stage was double-digit unemployment, inflation, heading towards 17% interest rates, and the economy was stuck, they didn't take anyone on at that stage. So they said to me, right, you've got the job, but at the start of the next financial year, so July 1, 1983. So in the meantime, I thought, all right, I'll keep working at Channel 10. Hopefully I'll get the job in TV. I'd always thought I'd go to the newspapers. Anyway, as it kept going and going, Channel 10 weren't giving any jobs away. I thought I'd get a job at the Herald Sun in those days. It didn't come. So I had the age in my pocket. And my sister, who lived up in Sunbury, said there's an ad in the paper for a reporter for the Macedon Rangers Telegraph. So I applied and I got the job. So that was actually, goes back to your last question. So I thought, right, here I am. I've got into RMIT. In those days, there were 20 kids in the state got in to do a journalism degree. So I got in there. So I thought, right, I can get my degree. I'm working part-time at Channel 10. Great, fantastic. If they're not going to give me the job, I'm going to have a crack at having a real go at playing footy. I'm going to really set myself and have a go and see if I'm good enough or not good enough. Probably wasn't going to be good enough in the first place anyway, but I was going to have a real go. So I thought, I've got these things covered. I'm still living at home in a housing commission house with mum and dad, so that was okay. But I needed to get some money. My sister was still at school. Mum and dad, I think, just retired. Things were pretty tight for dough in those days. So anyway, up I go to the Macedon Rangers and I get the job. So the first day, they say, write a story about yourself. I thought, good. So I write a story about myself, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, Channel 10 rang me and said, we need you to come in and work this weekend, this this week. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I was about to call you because I've got this job and I can't be hanging out waiting for you. They were quite stunned. And they said, look, can you come in on Friday? So I wagged RMIT, went into Channel 10, and they said, right, okay, if you want to have the job, we'll give you a cadetship. So I forced their hand. And then I went back to poor old Macedon Range and said, look, I'm sorry to muck you around, but I've got this job. And they said, well, can you write another story? Macedon Range's man poached by Channel 10. So I wrote about myself, and some people will probably say that I haven't stopped talking about myself ever since.
Who would have known, Ed, that the Macedon Rangers Telegraph is actually responsible for setting off everything that you've ever done?
Well, the launching pad certainly pushed Channel 10 over the line. And I remember going back to the editor at the time, who was the owner, because you did everything in those days. I thought this would be a great place to learn the trade, so that when I got to the age, I'd be firing. I've had 6 months of RMIT. I've been working hard and hopefully even getting a kick playing for North at some level. And anyway, Channel 10 got it, and they put the kibosh. They said, you're either going to be a television reporter or you can go and be a footballer. And I spoke to Dennis Pagan, and he said, son, you're either going to be a footballer or you're going to, which one is it? I know, okay. So I was a long way off, mate. I think it was about 100 blokes training at North in the under-19s in those days. And Barry Cable was coaching the seniors, and I think Blighty was still running around. Those guys were there. So I did have a good look around the change rooms and thought, I'm more of a chance of getting a kick at Channel 10 than I am at North.
I am laughing, Ed, because I know that's exactly the way that Dennis would put it. He goes, son, you've got a choice to make here. And I could just imagine Dennis framing it in those exact words.
Well, there was one practice match I did play, and I said to him, I might have to leave at half time because I've got to go and report the district cricket at Carlton's ground. And he looked at me as if I had 3 heads. I look at it now and go, of course he looked at me like I had 3 heads. Who would have thought I was trying to juggle a few balls at this?
Even back then.
Kicks in the first quarter, and that was it. And I went down to North. That's when we had the conversation. I started to read the tea leaves a bit clearer by that stage.
And you mentioned that, Ed. Did you, even way back then, did you have a vision of where you thought all this could end up? Like, just take people into the mindset of a young Eddie McGuire, and trying to think of where you were going to end up.
Well, Corey, it was interesting because, as a kid growing up, in Broadie, you actually feared a lot. When the word would go around that the layoffs were on in all the factories, and you could just see everyone's head dropping. And, especially at this moment in time, our old stomping ground, our postcodes in lockdown, and, it's a hard time for people. So it was a hard life in those days for my parents, who were older, came from overseas. They worked hard and they dedicated everything to their kids, and education was everything for us. So I was lucky in grade 6. I had a great teacher, an old nun called Sister Matthew, and I went to her and said, listen, you have to turbocharge me. I'm going for this exam at CBC St Kilda, Christian Brothers College St Kilda, and I need to get it. I need to win this scholarship. Otherwise, I don't think Mum and Dad can send me to the local school, Ferry College, at that stage. And it was probably going to be Broadie High, which wasn't going that well in those days. It was a pretty rough, tough situation. So anyway, as it happened, this nun put her heart and soul into me. Mum and Dad were great. My older brother and sister were fantastic to me, and we studied and studied. And so, in fact, I studied harder for that grade 6 exam than I did for anything else in my life. Anyway, I got it, went back for the scholarship, and got the scholarship. And for me, that was, in my mind, that was Willy Wonka's golden ticket to the world. Once I had that, then I realised, to quote Ron Barassi, if it is to be, it's up to me. And I just said, right, okay, from there. And maybe I was a little bit older in my mindset, because I had older parents who came from the other side of the world to give us the opportunity. So it was drilled into us on a daily basis. This is the great land. This is the big opportunity. You've got the brains, make it happen. You can do it. And so I always felt confident in your ability. But as I said, you're always fearful walking around. It was like in Broadmeadows, walking around in a school uniform, carrying a euphonium football bag in your school bag. You didn't walk home from the station. You actually tacked around like you're in a yachting race, trying to dodge that group up on that corner, cross the road, cross back, all the rest of it. You didn't want to have a fight every 5 minutes, and it was on. So you learned how to, navigate life. And you get on the train every morning. And what I used to really enjoy, and my brother put this thought into my mind, because he used to do the same things. You get on with all the working class people, going off to do their jobs in the factories, working, hard blokes who you knew from the footy club or the local church and things, who were going off to do a hard day's work. And then as you went down the track, get to Essendon, you get some professional people getting on, lawyers, accountants, clerks, whatever they were in the CBD. And you go all the way through. Then I'd get on the Sandringham train and get off at Windsor. And, again, you go past the factories in inner city Richmond, the Rosella factory. I mean, I used to walk up to Broady Station, you'd smell what was being made at Nabisco, and you'd know what soup was going on at Rosella on the other side of town. So there's all this industrial heartland. And I'd look, my two theatres or fields of dreams, I'd go past the old Herald building on the train and then past the MCG. And somewhere in amongst there was where I thought I was going to land and where I wanted to land. And I had no thoughts of television in those days. TV was Hollywood. And then suddenly I applied ever and Channel 10 invited me in. So at some stage, Corey, and it wasn't until probably a couple of years in at Channel 10 where you're a cadet and you're making the tea and you're still the dog's body. At some stage I decided that I remember Steve Quartermain said to me one day, he said, you're an ass. You're lucky. You're a tin ass, he said. And I went, really? I always felt I was a bit unlucky. And I thought, well, maybe I am lucky. And from that moment, I decided I was lucky. And I just changed my whole attitude. It was a couple of little things like that along the journey. A good mate of mine, Colin DeLutis, who started West Coast Jeans and's gone on to become a multi-millionaire. And I was complaining one day to Colin that I was doing all this work at Channel 10. I had my own segment called Doing the Rounds, was the only one of its in existence and has ended up being to this day. Used to get 6, 7, 8 minutes a night, which meant I was flying around the chopper going to all the different clubs, breaking stories, doing personality pieces, all these different things that people don't do these days. But I had this massive segment and I was whinging that the bloke who was a state political reporter was on twice the money and doing 1 minute of stories a night, basically repeating what was in the Herald Sun, the usual wings that journos have. And my mate Colin said to me, he said, Ed, I pay $10,000 for the 30-second ad that comes on before your sports segment every night. He said, have you ever thought how much that gives you the chance to promote yourself? And I'd never thought of it like that. I thought I was a worker at that stage, Corey. And then I realised, no, I'm not. This is an opportunity. They're actually paying me to show the world that I'm good at doing something. Yeah. So my mindset completely changed. So you talk about where your mindset changed. My mindset changed the day I opened up the letter with my mum at the front gate at 74 Gerber Street, Broadmeadows, and I'd won a scholarship. I thought, right, away we go. My mindset changed when I went to CBC and I realised I was as smart as, it could go with everybody else and, and won the best and fairest. I could compete, I was there and I could go. Then my mindset changed when I realised, no, maybe I'm lucky rather than unlucky. And then I changed again when I realised, hang on a second, this is an opportunity. And suddenly, rather than being a worker, I was my own business. And it clicked like that. And I thank Colin absolutely for changing my mindset. And from that moment on, I went, right, okay, there's a whole new world to play this. So I went into Channel 10 instead of just reporting. I went into the sales team, worked out how the money side of things worked in TV, worked out the different areas, very much silos. You're on air, you're off air, you're a sales guy, you're this, you're in publicity, etc. I then went to work on what the industry was all about, and that opened up all these new opportunities, and that's where it all started, and away we went.
It certainly did. Now, the other thing I think with you, Ed, that everyone sees out there, this amazing work ethic that you've got, but I think what I'm able to see you from the outside, I think that because you've got this nearly childlike enthusiasm in the way you go about your work, that you working long hours is no real issue to you, because it's that really old adage, if you find something that you dearly love, and you're testament to it.
Yeah, it is. And I think I've tried to, the one thing I always impress upon people when they ask me for advice, and I always say to people, don't become jaded. It's the old thing, you could be eating truffles for dinner and you'll get sick of them eventually. Don't people get into jobs that they've always wanted to get into, and then they complain. Like, it's like in footy. Come July, everyone in the media is sick of going to the footy and calling the footy. And you go, well, I tell you what about if you don't do it? Oh, no, I don't want to do that. You go, okay, so you've got to keep the enthusiasm. Of course it becomes a grind. It's like everything. Everything becomes a job. You were a star sportsman. But at some stage, to become a superstar sportsman or to play at the top level and have consistent success, it becomes hard work. The natural ability takes you so far. The day you walk into North Melbourne and everything's brand new and there's Dennis Pagan and there's Wayne Carey and all that, 10 years down the track and you're running around needing an injection in your ankle to get out on the ground, it becomes hard work. But you've got to keep sight of the fact that this is something you still really want to do, and there will be a day when you can't. So for me, to answer that question, I always had a motto that was my motto, and that was, if I work harder than somebody who's got more ability, then I'm a chance. If I work harder and I've got equal ability, I'm probably going to win. And if I work harder and I've got more ability, then I'm probably going to give them a 4. And there's only one consistent thought there, and that is, how hard do you want to work?
Yeah.
The rest of it will take care of itself. Luck will come into play, different things. But if you work hard, you give yourself a chance. So work to a lot of people is a 4-letter word, but so is luck, and so is rich, and so is all sorts of different things like that I'm just making up as I go. But bottom line is, if you work, you give yourself a chance. And then if you start winning, then that makes work a whole lot more fun.
Tell you what, Ed, Dennis Pagan would be very proud of what came out of your mouth in the last 2 or 3 minutes. You've a bit more curly hair, and that could have been Dennis Pagan.
Well, I remember Dennis one time, going back to you saying, that down at the under-19s at North, and I said, I trained in there. And I said, I remember talking to Dennis about this one day, and he said, Ed, to be a footballer, you have to be the person. You decided you want to do something else because when the moment came, you said, no, I'm going to go there. For whatever serendipity, and, a lot of the serendipity was, I reckon, I was more of a chance, as I said, of being a reporter than being a senior footballer. And, I looked around in those under-19s, Matty Larkins, Peter German, a guy called Tony Fury was a guy who got injured, Mick Passmore, all these, there was Darren Steele, all these guys, and they won the premiership, and they were gun players, and and North was a pretty successful club even at that stage anyway. So you had to be really good to get a game at North Melbourne. But you look at it, and Dennis made this point. He said, it doesn't matter whether you could make it or not. It's did you play? And the answer is no. So therefore, you didn't play. Now, that doesn't mean you might not have been good enough. It just meant that when the time came, you didn't have everything focused to give yourself the chance to get to that position. So it wouldn't have mattered if I had the skill of Nathan Buckley. I was going somewhere else by that stage. And Dennis, obviously, he read it before I did. He said, when I'm coming saying, do you mind if I leave at half time? I've got to go and report. I think it was pretty simple to him to say, mate, I think you're probably heading that way rather than this way. So it's a pretty simple thing. You either do or you don't.
Yeah, exactly. Now, Ed, I'm curious now, like you also, I did mention before, you obviously do these mountainous hours, but are you more conscious nowadays from a physical and even a mental point of view of your physical and mental health? Like in terms of nowadays, I know that you, over the journey, you've gone on different fitness kicks and things like that, but are you more conscious about it now, looking after your physical and mental health?
Yeah, totally, Corey. I mean, I used to say when I was a young bloke, I'd rather hit the wall than die wondering where it was. Get to the full extent, and then I hit the wall, and I realised, might have just maybe if I had got close enough to see it, that would have been better than actually hitting it. And there's been a couple of things that happened where I was just completely physically and mentally cooked, and it's one of those things. Suddenly, you don't realise it, but each step of the way. So suddenly, you're getting injections into your knee, and the pain is there, and you're operating on 3 or 4 hours, and then it hits you. And you can do it for a fair while, and I reckon I do it for 20-something years, but then it hits. And you only have to hit it once, and you make a mistake, or situation with Adam Goods, I've said it a million times, I was trying to make the exact opposite point. It came out the wrong way. And that was that. And now I was completely cooked. I'm not making excuses. I'm just telling you what was happening. I've apologised. I apologised 2 minutes after it happened and retracted. But that's where it is. Okay, you got to live with that. But that was because I wasn't thinking straight, and I was going too hard. So you do have to realise. Since then, there's been a couple of times where I've pushed myself again, and now I'm realising. I got physically out of shape because you're tired, you've got no time, you can't train. You're starting at 4:30 in the morning. You're not going to get up at 3:30 to go for a run and all that sort of stuff. It just doesn't work. And you're working your way through blah, 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 blah. So they're all the excuses. So ultimately, you've got to take stock of yourself and say, okay, do you want these things to happen again? No. All right. Look after yourself. Get fit. Drop 10, 15 kilos. You become fat. You're going to put yourself under enormous pressure as it is. Physically, you're going to put more pressure on yourself if you're not fit. So get some discipline into your mind. Stop talking the talk. Actually do it. Literally walk the walk. Get off this, eat right food, watch your drinking, all that sort of stuff, and don't look for excuses. And, as I said, there's plenty of reasons, and sometimes there are excuses, but ultimately, if you're being fair dinkum, you've got to look within yourself and say, you're leading yourself down a bad path here, take the right path. The fork in the road. You've got to pick the right one, don't you, sometimes? And sometimes you can go down the wrong one, but if you can put in reverse and get back, you can get back on the right path pretty quickly.
Yeah. What's the one thing that you've done in terms of that physical and mental health type space that you would never have thought you would have done in your wildest dreams? Has it been, I know the diet, I know there was some diet changes you made.
I mean, look, I did one where I didn't eat for about 30 days, but I was doing that as much as, to be honest, I did it as a mental challenge. Yeah. And because you get into a couple of diets along the way, and there's always a reason not to do the running or whatever. You're going out to a function, you might be at a lunch and a dinner and everything, or you're on the breakfast running, I've got to eat, and then you work out that, no, there is a better way to do this thing. So, to be honest, given the fact that when I was at North Melbourne, Dennis Pagan laughed at me because I was too skinny, and everyone else, if you had have asked me then that I would have had to lose weight at some stage of my life, I would have laughed at you. So, again, what it comes down to is if you like to think of yourself as being relatively intelligent, you've actually got to listen to your own song sometimes as well. So, we're all good at giving advice. Sometimes we have to maybe listen to our own advice. And I think that was something that eventually probably landed in my lap. And I probably pushed the envelope for a long, long time. And then ultimately you realise, okay, that's enough. You've got to take care of yourself, because by not taking care of yourself, it's impacting on a lot of other people.
This episode is brought to you by National Make Good Solutions, experts in taking your commercial property back to the day it was built at the end of your lease. Now, Ed, with all our people that join us on Fork in the Road, we always have a photo that means the world to them and something that actually inspires them just by seeing the sheer photo. And I must admit, even seeing your photo, this one actually even gave me goosebumps. Very jealous that we never got to do a photo like this of the photo in the middle of the ground, but I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, well, it was one that I didn't know was happening. It was taken by Colin Patch from the Herald Sun, and I saw it on the Monday or the Tuesday after the grand final in 2010. And for me, it was significant. I was in the rooms after we'd won the premiership at the Pies, and it was gone a bit quiet. And I said, where is everyone? And he said, oh, the boys are outside, out in the middle of the ground. So I had my two boys with me at that stage. Joe was 10 and Alexander was 8, and they're mad Collingwood boys, and it was such a great moment for us. And Carla, my wife, was with me as well. So I said, come up and have a look up here. So we walked up the race, and I deliberately wanted to stay in the race out of the way, but there was a few supporters still there, and, they were yelling over the fence. And I wanted this to just be a moment that I could just let envelop me and my boys. So Carla stood where she was, and I walked around to the goal square. And because of the lens that Colleen used, it looks a bit closer than this, but the players were out in the middle of the ground, so they didn't know I was there, and I was just another person back in the goal square. But what it is was the boys had sung the song out in the ground. They all had their boots off, but their Collingwood jumpers and shorts on, barefooted, most of them. They had the Premiership Cup in the middle of the circle, and they were having their private moment. So my boys, if you like, as Mick Malthouse used to say, our boys, were out in the ground, and they're having their moment. And the stadium, the MCG, was pretty much empty, other than a few people who were sort of, yelling at me at that stage. So I moved around, and I had my two boys under each arm. So they had them like that, as you can see in the photo. And I remember what I was saying to them. and it was a moment of a father with his sons, and a great moment of just warmth and a dream come true for me and for them that we're sharing at that moment. I said to them, boys, that is what happens when you work hard and you work together. That makes it all worthwhile. The shortcuts in life, they don't cut it. Whatever early joy you get from a shortcut or from not having a real go, you miss out on the ultimate. And this is just a great moment for us. And I just hugged them. And I was only there for, I reckon, 30 seconds. And then I got off the ground because I didn't want to be hanging around. It was the boys' moment, but I just came out the back of it. So when I saw the photo in the paper, I nearly fell off my chair like you did. And it was a photo that was only that big in the paper, amongst all the other photos. And I asked if I could get hold of it. And there's a colour copy and there's the black and white copy that you have there. My wife had framed for me that I have in my office. And it's very special to me, as I said, because it wasn't posed. It was completely organic and natural. And it was a moment with my two boys. And they're wrapped that they're in that photo as well. That's something that they've got that they can pass on to their kids as well. And of course, the 20 blokes who are out there, or the 22 blokes who are out there playing for Collingwood on that day, 23 blokes, because Leon Davis was a very big part of it in the first week and didn't play in the second. But it was a great moment. It was a team I loved. It was a team that gave me a sense of identity. The first time I went to Victoria Park, I didn't really know where I belonged as a first-generation migrant. It was like out in Broadie. He had a Scottish father, so he had a funny accent, so they gave it to you. You just wear a hat. My mum was Irish, or is Irish. And so when I went to Victoria Park and they ran onto the ground and suddenly the roar went up, it was the sense of identity that I always was looking for, without even knowing I was looking for it. So the club's given me everything, and for that moment to be a part of it in a small way, that photo just gives me great joy and great pride and a wonderful memory.
It is a brilliant photo. I must admit, I did have goosebumps when you told me that story then. Now, the other one, being in trouble, I must admit, if there were two people in the world I wouldn't have to make the phone call to, it might be one, Eddie McGuire, and the other one would be Jeff Walsh. You're the least people I'd want to call when I'm in trouble, but then once it's passed, you're probably the two people I'd want at my side. So is that from your point of view? I know with Walshy and what a great man he is, but I suppose where does that come from you? That, obviously you've had a few guys over the journey that have transgressed, but I know that, look, I'd imagine they cop a burst really quick, but then once it's over, you stick fat in terms of your loyalty.
Thank you for saying that, but I'd like to think that is the case. Yeah, I'm quick to anger sometimes, but I'm also quick to forgive. I really believe in that. I think you've got to sometimes give a full and frank account of where the situation is, and then you go, right, okay, how do we fix it from here? Things are never as good as they seem or as bad as they seem. And, I think sometimes there's a lot of empathy goes out the door. I've been in the media since I was 13 years of age, but the media has become a lot more aggressive because people now get on and comment. The clickbait, as we tell journos always, if I mention clickbait on Footy Classified, Caroline Wilson throws her hands up, but we know that's the currency these days. So, I know that, if the Herald Sun of Mark Robinson writes a column having a go at me, which seems to happen every other week these days, there's going to be 500 comments, they're happy, and that's where it's at. But I've got to try and protect the blokes. Look, I like the fact, Corey, that in Broadie it was one in, all in. And if you could look after your mate or the people next door, if they'd been laid off at the factory, we all kicked in. I remember one day the house next door burnt down in Broadie, and the people next door had not much. There wasn't much to burn in the house. I can remember that. And I remember going in with my dad, and he grabbed the bloke next door and just pulled him to the side away from everyone. And he opened up his wallet, and dad only had $20 in it, and he gave him the $20. And I looked at him, $20 in those days for a young boy like me who was getting 20 cents pocket money. It was like $1 million. And I remember because it was a Saturday, and that meant that Dad had no money in his wallet for the weekend. And he never said anything other than when we were walking back to the house over the fence, I said, Dad, did you give him $20? And Dad said, yeah, but don't say anything to anybody. Don't ever mention it again. And I just thought that sense of charity and keeping it like that just was a really good lesson to me, to see that you look after people as best you can. Give what you've got and you don't ask for it back. Wasn't a loan. You either give charity or you become a loan merchant, you know. And so I think I'm very big on that. And so to answer your question, mate, yeah, I can give a spray, but that's the Glasgow in me. That's, you know, Alex Ferguson, the hairdryer, as they say.
The hairdryer.
My dad, you know, Scotsman, when they're yelling at you, it means they love you because they actually care. Conversation, but then you forgive and you get on with life. I mean, there's too many people who walk around holding grudges, and life's too short for that. So there might be people out there who hate me, Corey, but there seriously is not anyone that I hate, and I can't be bothered with that. And it's every day's a new adventure, and if you can help somebody along the way, fantastic. And generally, you know, if you can help people when they're really at a low ebb, then that's, you know, why not? Why wouldn't you do that? You get so much joy out of helping people in that situation.
Yeah, and look, I'm conscious of time, Ed, and I'm incredibly grateful of spending some time with you. But you speak of, you talk about helping people out. I think one of the great things that you've done with the Collingwood Footy Club is the Christmas lunch that you guys do, that I think's absolutely brilliant. I know I always see you down there. Is it on Christmas Day?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Christmas Day we go down, but it's become part of our family. You know, my boys came down when they were 3 and 5, and you know, they've grown up. So that's Christmas Day. That's our family Christmas now. And yeah, I must admit, I know this is a cliche, but I get far more out of it than I give. You know, I'm told that the people like the fact that I come down because we muck around and it's all happening, and they feel. There was one year I couldn't go. I was overseas, and they almost revolted apparently. But I sent a video, and they're happy that I hadn't forgotten them, because people like that feel like they've forgotten. That people are there for a moment and they're not there. And you know, I think that's important. It's the ethos of what Collingwood's about. We make mistakes at Collingwood. You know, we're not perfect, not by a long shot, but we try hard. And I think all the clubs do that. And I think that's what keeps us all involved in footy. Yeah, we want to win the premiership and the Brownlow, and it's great, and it's all the rest of it. But ultimately, it is a community game. You know, the difference between Collingwood and the New England Patriots is when the Patriots win the Super Bowl, Bob Kraft buys himself a new plane. It's his club. It's his business. When we win it, we build another community centre, or we go and build more houses for Magpie Nest. And we decided early on, Corey, that if we're going to stand for something, if you don't stand for something, you stand for nothing, is what we said. So when we had no dough at Collingwood, we got into philanthropy. And now that we've got some dough, until recent times we had dough, then, you know, it actually was a test to actually give money when you didn't have it. So it's a bit like my dad. When he only had $20 in his wallet, he gave the $20. It's easy if you've got $1 million to give $1,000, isn't it? And so that was a good touchstone for our club, that we had to be more than just a footy club. Because ultimately, you know, 40 young blokes running around making good money, chasing some leather is all very well, but at the same time it can be a bit naff if you drill down into it. If that is the manifestation of everything that goes with it, then you go, well, this is the catalyst of something that makes sense. So that's me trying to justify my love of the game or anything, but if it is, then I justify it that way. And we're really proud of what we do. You know, your old club, North Melbourne, does a fantastic thing with the huddle, with multiculturalism. Richmond doing a fantastic thing in the Indigenous space. Essendon are out doing great things with disabled athletes, etc., etc., etc. Everyone's doing it. So we're not anything in particularly special, but we picked the homeless because we believe that was right in the ethos of our club. Our clubs, the stands at Victoria Park were built by the unemployed labourers during the Great Depression. We had soup kitchens, but we sort of made it into a special occasion. We had women's stands because there was nothing else for the women to do in a really hard period of Australian history. So similarly, we do it. We have Christmas Day, and we have people, we send invitation out. We have it, you know, in a very special part of our club, the VIP glass house, where, you know, millionaires have weddings and all that sort of stuff. Well, on Christmas Day, it's their club, it's their position. So we love it. And as I said, without being a cliche and without wanting to sound like St. Vincent de Paul or anything, you really do turn up on that day. I look forward to it. And then you come home. Luckily for me, I've been blessed with a beautiful family, and I'm pretty well off these days, certainly in comparison to the people at the lunch. And I sit down to my own Christmas lunch, and I do. I think, thank my lucky stars, thank God, thank my family, thank my good fortune that this is my Christmas lunch. But I'm glad I was able to share one beforehand with other people who don't have that home to go to. So it's a sobering experience.
Yeah, it is a great thing the footy club does. Now, we've got just a couple of quick questions to go. Now, we might have already covered this already, Ed, but the name of the interview is called Fork in the Road. Now, what would be Eddie McGuire's single fork in the road moment of his career where it could have gone one way or the other? And like I said, you might have already touched on that earlier already.
Yeah, pretty much. It was probably about grade 5, grade 6, where my mum was sick, my dad, the layoffs were on, he was getting towards the end of his working life as well. There was a few things going on in our house, and it was a tough time. And yeah, it could have gone either way. And I was lucky enough, as I said, I had a wonderful old nun, Sister Matthew, who later on went back to her real name, Agnes Murtagh. And I remember going to her funeral, and I've never been more moved at a funeral in my life, Corey. It was quite funny how much it just impacted on me when I realised just how much she'd given of her life to so many people, of which I was just one small boy in the classroom, but what an impact she had. And also, as I've always said, my mum and dad and my brother and sisters who really stuck behind me at that stage. And in that hard period, I really knuckled down and had a go. And then when I won that scholarship, it changed my life. Now, would things have been different? I don't know. Maybe I would have had enough go to make a life of it. But for me, that was the fork in the road for me. I was only 10 or 11 years of age. It was an early one to come, but it set it up from there. And then from that moment on, there were no excuses. I got the opportunity. Everyone always wants the opportunity. All I want is an opportunity, not an equal opportunity, just the opportunity to be equal. And it came, and I like to think I made the most of it.
Yeah, certainly did, Ed. Now, one final question before we wrap it up. What's Eddie McGuire's legacy when it's all said and done? What is the body of work's never finished, but what do you think it looks like at the end? How do you want it to be seen?
Oh, look, I'd like to hope that people would say I had a go, that I tried my best to do things to make whatever I've been involved in better. Ron Evans had that line for the AFL that you're a custodian of the game and that you must leave it a better place than what it was when you took over. And that's it. And I hope, Corey, that people remember the fun. I hope they remember the great fun that the footy show brought to people. The great things that we've had along the way. I hope people remember that footy is fun and sport and life is fun. And yes, it's serious, and yes, there are hard moments and we all face them, but we've got to keep laughing. We've got to have a bit of fun and not to take things too seriously. That doesn't mean that you laugh at things and don't look back on things and go, well, actually, that was a mistake. We must redress that. You can do all that. But at the same time, I think one of the biggest things that people need to do a lot more these days, to be perfectly honest, Corey, is people have to learn to forgive themselves. And that is not make excuses. Analyse, work out whether you did wrong deliberately or just by mistake, redress the problems, do the best you can, but you're not going to please everybody. So ultimately, to be able to go on in your life, sometimes you have to draw a line under things and say, well, I did my best there. There's no more I can do. Warmth, next. And I think there's so much, I see kids these days who can't get away from things. They make one mistake on social media and they get beaten to death on it. The media now never misses a chance to go back to find something. I often say, if you're handing out gold bars in Burke Street, there'll always be some bastard who complains they're too heavy. You can't please some people. Yeah. So you realise at some stage that, okay, I've given it my best shot, I'm on to the next adventure. But I think hopefully, to be perfect, if I really wanted to wrap myself up, I'd like to think that most people, or people would one day look at it and say, the things he did was done from a good heart. That there was no malice involved. The battles along the way, they're skirmishes. That's a bit of, you got to have a few blues along the journey. but get on with it. You win them and wear them is the way we were always taught in Broady, mate. You don't complain, you don't explain. Get on with it, and then. But you'd like to think that ultimately that the skirmishes were coming from a good place.
They were. Now look, Ed, it's been fantastic.
Yeah. I thought it was full of bullshit, and there it is. There's living proof. But
no, not at all.
I mean it.
No, but look, it's been fantastic to sit down. I know that, look, everyone out there, we all know Ed's incredibly busy, and he always does make a lot of time for me. Now, just on a little side note, Ed did my first interview when he was at Channel 10 at the Ascot Vale Leisure Centre, and it was my first interview in league football. I remember Ed coming in the hot, with the hot chlorine. It was going around in the Ascot Vale Leisure Centre. Of course, Ed had a suit on. That goes without saying. But Ed was my first interview in footy. So it's great to return the favour where you sit down with me. And on behalf of everyone, we really appreciate it, mate. We've got a lot out of it. So sincere thank you.
Good on you, Corey. And congratulations to you, mate. I mean, it is funny. It's a bit of a cliche, but us Broady boys do stick together. And, I still can recite off the top of my head every AFL player who came from Broady, from Bruce Dill from Jacana through to Curly Austin, and Mark Dawson. He used to live across the street from me. I used to ride his horse when he went to school. Can you believe that? He had back. My mum, I was only 3 or 4. My mum would go across and get the horse out of his backyard and take me on horse rides around the backyard and then put it back over there. And Smokey's been a bloke I've known since I was 3 years of age, and we still have a beer every summer down at the Sorrento Hotel. To me, that's what footy's all about, and that's what community's all about. Back to St Dominic's and Broadmeadows, to Jacana where you were playing, and Gladstone Park and all those places. You mentioned early on Kevin Ramsey. Well, half an hour ago, I was doing a Zoom call with Kevin Ramsey. So there you go. The old boys, we all stick together, and it's been a great ride. And I don't miss the irony or the serendipity. I've used that word a couple of times today, and that is, the coming together of things in a beneficial way. So it is. It makes a big impact on me, Corey, that you remember that I did your first interview, and I'm glad that I've been your interviewee today.
No, big thank you, mate, and everyone sincerely enjoyed it, so thank you.
Thanks, mate. Good on you. Go Pies.